Greetings, everybody. Jess Romero here. So, for this week's discussion, I'm discussing my research project for my dissertation, which will be to analyze the American historical foreign policy and interrelations with that of the Republic of Iraq, with the nation of Iraq, the people of Iraq. And so, in this research, I have found that there is a tremendous amount of historical record to sift through. And so I have somewhat already refined it down some, um, mainly to end pre Operation Iraqi Freedom. One of the main emphases of this will be to ascertain America's leading role or contributing role to the events leading to that. Though this dissertation will not go into that in great detail, it will nonetheless analyze the historical record of the events preceding that, mainly, from the late 1940s, early 1950s onward, as discussed in my historiographical essay assignment, where I talked about briefly, for example, beginning with President John F. Kennedy's early American expenditures into Iraq and the aiding of the first Ba'athist regime against um, the Soviet Union, and their attempt to undermine uh, the young Iraqi nation that was formed after the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War One, or towards the end of World War One. So, in determining the historical facts for this dissertation, I am sifting through a lot of historical records from official sources, though I'm trying to ascertain and glean some additional resources, both from government records, government entities, whether it be in the Department of State or the Department of Defense, or even presidential records, or the sub departments such as USAID or whatnot, as well as that from any that I can gain from Iraq, and even third party nations that are not directly at play within this dissertation, but have some overlapping contribution within the events and the affairs, such as like maybe perhaps the Russians, seeing is that a lot of these events in the Middle East, within the Persian Gulf and Iraq, did in fact entail the Russians. Many times the Russians were in Iraq as partners with the Iraqis, and there was a bit of a contestation, if you will, of foreign policy, whether it be of the American and the Western led, or I should say the Western led liberal world order of America, or that of the Soviet Union communist uh, stance towards their Marxism and their ideology during the Cold War, leading up to the Persian Gulf War. So a lot of this will deal with a lot of contrasting the historical records from these different sources. The importance of, I believe, this research is that it will give a good basis for both why certain events in the past happened. Um, well, like, for example, why the United States armed both Iran and Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War. What was the motivating factor for Saddam Hussein to retake Kuwait? And when I say retake Kuwait, I say that because in the 1950s, not many know this, but Kuwait was carved off. And in fact, many historians would consider that to be the first Gulf War in the 1950s, when Kuwait was, in fact, carved off from Iraq and made into its own nation. And so there's a lot of this historical record that I'd like to research and contrast as to determine what exactly is America's foreign policy goals, its purposes, its agendas, and what did we do to contribute to the events leading up to, through the Cold War, to the Gulf War, to the post-Gulf War of the 1990s, in which the United Nations and the U.S. put heavy embargoes on Iraq, and then ultimately leading towards the the events preceding that contributed to Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so the importance of this overall is, I believe it's good to know these things. It's important for the historical record, the posterity. It's good to understand, determine foreign policy, American foreign policy, as well as our overall interrelations with the Iraqis and the Iraqi Republic. What was our purpose for being there? This is a place that is very ancient. The Romans were there for many centuries. In fact, the Romans fought a series of wars for nearly 800 years against the Parthians, the Persians of the different various empires of ancient Iran, and many contests of military and political, aggression took place in Iraq. So Iraq is as they say, the cradle of civilization. It is where civilization began. It is where the rule of law began, with the oldest law that we know of coming from Ur-Nammu in ancient Ur of the Chaldeans. So it's important to understand these things because we need to understand our part in the grand scheme of American history, as well as Iraqi history, as well as world history. All of it kind of culminates together in this, and it's good to know what is the United States. What is the United States' place in all of this, and to help determine our path in all of that, and as well our path going forward, especially as the world order begins to change and transform and change to a post American world order. All right, thank you very much, Jess Romero. I hope you have a great weekend. Take care.